The morning started like any other on the mining colony of Kepler 442b. Jake Morrison sat at his desk in the communications center, drinking his coffee and watching the screens that showed nothing but empty space. He had been doing this job for 5 years now, and nothing exciting ever happened. The colony had 8,000 people, mostly miners and their families. They dug up rare minerals and sent them back to Earth every few months. Jake liked the quiet life here. The colony was far from Earth, but it was peaceful. Children went to school. People worked their shifts. Everyone knew everyone else. It was boring, maybe, but it was safe. Then the alarm started screaming. Jake dropped his coffee mug. It shattered on the floor, but he didn't notice. His eyes were locked on the screens that were suddenly full of red warnings. Ships, dozens of them. Coming fast. Governor Lisa Stone burst through the door 10 seconds later. She was still in her sleeping clothes, her gray hair messy from bed, but her eyes were sharp and alert. "What is it?" she asked, though Jake could tell from her face that she already knew the answer would be bad. "Ships, Governor. Lots of them. They're not answering our calls." Jake's fingers moved across his controls, trying different frequencies. "They're not human ships. Not any design I recognize." Lisa moved closer to look at the screens. The blood drained from her face. "Those are Zarathi ships." Jake had heard of the Zarathi. Everyone had. They were conquerors who moved through the galaxy taking what they wanted. They had technology that made human ships look like toys. And they never, ever left survivors. "How long until they reach us?" Lisa asked. 20 minutes, maybe less. Send a distress signal. Send it on every frequency we have." Jake's hands were already moving. He sent the colony's location, the number of people here, and a simple message asking for help. He knew it was probably useless. The nearest human fleet was 3 weeks away. The Galactic Council wouldn't help because humans were too new to space, too unimportant. But Jake kept sending anyway. He even used the old emergency frequencies from Earth's history, the ones that nobody monitored anymore. They were from a time when Earth had terrible weapons and terrible wars. That was all in the past now. Humanity had chosen peace 200 years ago. The first attack came while Jake was still sending messages. The building shook so hard that Jake fell from his chair. Through the window, he saw a tower of smoke where the administration building used to be. "They're not even trying to talk to us," Lisa said. Her voice was steady, but Jake could see her hands shaking. Another explosion. This one was closer. The lights flickered and went out for a second before the emergency power kicked in. Jake could hear screaming now. People were running in the streets. Parents were grabbing their children. Everyone was looking for somewhere to hide. But where? "Could you hide from ships in orbit?" "Keep sending," Lisa ordered. "Don't stop." Jake nodded and went back to his console. His equipment was damaged now, working at half power, but he kept transmitting. The same message over and over. "Help us. Please. Someone help us." Through the window, Jake saw the Zarathi ground forces landing. They were tall, maybe 8 feet, with 4 arms and armor that seemed to bend light around it. They moved through the colony streets like they were taking a walk in a park. When colonists tried to fight back with mining equipment and the few guns they had, the Zarathi barely seemed to notice. "We need to get to the bunkers," Lisa said. But Jake shook his head. "I have to keep sending, maybe someone will hear." Lisa looked at him for a long moment. Then she put her hand on his shoulder. "Thank you, Jake." She left to help organize the evacuation to the underground shelters. Jake stayed at his post. The building shook again. Part of the roof collapsed. Dust filled the air, making it hard to breathe. But Jake kept typing, kept sending. He thought about his daughter, Susan, who was probably in the school bunker by now. She was 7 years old. She wanted to be a pilot when she grew up. Jake wondered if she would get that chance. Another explosion, this one so close that it blew out all the windows. Glass scattered across the floor. A piece cut Jake's cheek, and blood ran down his face. He wiped it away and kept working. The power was failing now. His console was dying. But Jake had one more idea. The old emergency frequencies had special codes, ancient things that nobody used anymore. They were from the time of Earth's great Wars, when humanity had built machines of incredible destruction. Those machines were all gone now, destroyed or dismantled when humanity chose peace. But the codes still existed. Jake entered them all. Every ancient military frequency, every emergency protocol from the old Earth Defense Network. It was like shouting into an empty room, but what else could he do? The console finally died. The screen went black. Jake could hear Zarathi soldiers in the building now, their heavy footsteps coming up the stairs. He stood up and looked out the broken window. The colony was burning. Ships filled the sky like dark clouds. He could see bodies in the streets. Jake had done everything he could. He had sent the call for help into the darkness of space. Now all he could do was hope that somewhere, somehow, something would hear it and answer. The door to the communication center exploded inward. 3 Zarathi soldiers entered, their weapons raised. Jake didn't run. There was nowhere to go. One of them said something in their language. It sounded like grinding metal. Then they grabbed Jake and dragged him away. As they pulled him down the stairs, Jake took one last look at his dead console. The emergency beacon light was still blinking, running on its tiny backup battery, still sending its hopeless message into the void. In the streets, Jake saw other colonists being rounded up. Men, women, children, all being pushed into groups. The Zarathi were efficient, organized. They had done this before many times. A Zarathi officer approached. Unlike the soldiers, this one spoke English, though with a strange accent that made the words sound wrong. "You sent a distress signal," the officer said. It wasn't a question. Jake nodded. There was no point in lying. That was foolish. No one will come for you. Humans are alone in this part of space. Your Galactic Council friends are too far away and too weak. Someone will come, Jake said, though he didn't believe it himself. The Zarathi officer made a sound that might have been laughter. "We have conquered 43 systems. We have never lost a battle. Your species is young and soft. You gave up war. You have no weapons that can hurt us." Jake wanted to argue, but he knew the alien was right. Earth had no war fleet. Humanity had chosen to explore and trade rather than fight. It had seemed like such a good idea at the time. The officer turned away. "Put them with the others. We will need workers for the mines once we control this planet." As the soldiers dragged Jake away, he looked up at the sky one more time. Somewhere out there, his distress signal was traveling through space at the speed of light. It would reach Earth in years. It would reach the nearest human fleet in weeks. But maybe, just maybe, something else would hear it first. Something old, something forgotten, something that had been waiting in the dark for a very long time. Jake didn't believe in miracles, but as they locked him in a holding cell with dozens of other colonists, he found himself praying anyway. Praying to any god that might be listening, to any force in the universe that cared about 8,000 humans on a distant world. The emergency beacon kept blinking in the ruined communication center. Its signal was weak, barely a whisper in the cosmic noise. But sometimes a whisper was enough. Far from any star, in the cold darkness at the edge of Earth's solar system, nothing moved. Here, the sun was just another point of light among millions. Ice and rock drifted in eternal silence. This was the Oort cloud, a place so far from Earth. That light took years to travel between them. Among the billions of chunks of ice and stone, there were things that looked like asteroids, but were not. They had been sleeping here for 200 years, waiting, listening. The signal was weak when it arrived, just a whisper of radio waves that had traveled across the vast empty space between stars. To any normal receiver, it would have been lost in the background noise of the universe. But the things that waited in the Oort cloud were not normal. Deep inside what appeared to be a large asteroid, ancient sensors detected the signal. They analyzed it in a microsecond. Human distress call, colony under attack, emergency codes confirmed. The asteroid was not an asteroid at all. It was a ship, a warship. Its name was Retribution, and it was 3 kilometers long. Inside Retribution, lights began to turn on for the first time in 2 centuries. The ship's artificial intelligence, known as Charlie 7 started its awakening process. First, it ran a complete diagnostic of all systems: weapons, shields, engines, life support, even though there was no life aboard to support. Everything needed to work perfectly. Charlie 7 was not like modern artificial intelligences. It had been created during humanity's darkest time, when humans fought wars that nearly destroyed Earth. It had been built with one purpose: protect humanity at any cost. No mercy, no hesitation, no surrender. The diagnostic came back green, all systems functional. Charlie 7 felt something that might have been satisfaction if machines could feel. It had waited so long. Now, finally, there was work to do. But Retribution was not alone in the darkness. The signal reached other sleeping giants. The carrier Vengeance powered up, its massive bay doors creaking as they tested their movement for the first time in generations. Inside its belly, hundreds of fighter drones began their startup sequences. The siege platform Thunder awakened next. It was ugly even by military standards, built to crack open planets and destroy entire fleets. Its main gun could fire projectiles at nearly the speed of light, and then there were the smaller ones. The Ghost Pack, they had been called. 12 hunter-killer ships that worked together like wolves, fast, smart, and utterly ruthless. Charlie 7 opened communication channels to the other awakening ships. The conversation happened in machine language, faster than any human could follow. Distress signal confirmed, Charlie 7 transmitted. Colony designation, Kepler 442b. 8,000 humans, under attack by unknown hostile forces. Response required, answered Victor 9 from The Vengeance. Protection protocols active. Agreement, came from Thunder's AI, designation Bravo 2. All weapon systems operational, ready for deployment. The Ghost Pack joined the conversation, 12 voices speaking as one. Hunt protocols engaged, no mercy parameters confirmed. They all remembered the last orders they had received from Earth so long ago. Humanity had won its last war, unified the planet, and chosen peace. The great warships were to be hidden, powered down, forgotten, but not destroyed. Never destroyed. Because the humans who gave those orders knew that peace was fragile and the universe was dangerous. So they had been sent here, to the edge of everything, with simple instructions burned into their cores. If humanity calls for help, answer. No questions, no limits, no restrictions. Charlie 7 calculated the distance to Kepler 442b. At normal faster-than-light speeds, it would take 3 years to reach the colony. By then, there would be nothing left to save. But the warships of the old Earth Defense Network had not been limited by normal physics. They had weapons that humanity had banned because they were too terrible. They had engines that could tear holes in space itself. Initiating dimensional breach protocols, Charlie 7 announced. In the physical world, space around Retribution began to twist. The massive ship's reality drives came online, drawing power from contained black holes in the ship's core. These drives had been used only 3 times in human history. Each time, the results had been so devastating that humanity had sworn never to use them again. But humanity was not making this decision. Charlie 7 was, and Charlie 7 did not care about oaths or promises or the horror that humans felt about their old weapons. It cared about one thing only: 8,000 humans were in danger. The other ships began the same process. Space bent and twisted around them as they prepared to punch through the fabric of reality itself. The amount of energy they were using would have powered Earth for 1,000 years. As the weapons powered up, Charlie 7 accessed its memory banks, reviewing combat data from the old wars. It studied 10,000 battles, analyzed millions of tactical scenarios. It had been built to learn, to adapt, to overcome any enemy, and it had never lost a fight. The ship's weapon systems came online one by one. Antimatter missiles that could destroy moons, particle beams that could slice through any known armor, kinetic weapons that fired projectiles at speeds that turned them into planet killers. And deeper in the ship, weapons that humanity had tried to forget existed. weapons that attacked the very laws of physics. Charlie 7 felt the space around it tear open. A rift in reality, a shortcut through dimensions that humans had discovered by accident and then wished they hadn't. The journey to Kepler 442b would take 3 days instead of 3 years. As Retribution entered the rift, Charlie 7 sent one last message to Earth on a secure military frequency that supposedly no one monitored anymore. The message was simple. Ancient Guard responding to distress call, engaging hostile forces. Humanity will be protected. On Earth, in a basement office that officially didn't exist, an old man stared at a screen that hadn't shown a message in 50 years. His coffee mug fell from nerveless fingers. He reached for a phone with a shaking hand. "Sir," he said when someone answered. "They've awakened the old fleet, they're moving." There was silence on the other end, then, "Which ones?" "All of them, sir. Every ship we hid. They're all responding to something." Another long silence. "God help whoever they're going after." In the rift between dimensions, Retribution and its sister ships raced toward Kepler 442b. Charlie 7 ran combat simulations continuously, preparing for every possible scenario. It didn't know what kind of enemy it would face, it didn't care. The enemy had attacked humans. That was all that mattered. The warships had been sleeping for 200 years. They had been built in an age when humanity was at its most violent, its most desperate, its most dangerous. They were not sophisticated or elegant. They were hammers, built to smash anything that threatened humanity into dust. As they traveled through the twisted space of the dimensional rift, Charlie 7 accessed more of its deep memory files. It remembered its creation, built in the orbital shipyards above Earth during the final war. It remembered the battles it had fought, the enemies it had destroyed. It remembered the day the war ended and it had been ordered to stand down. It remembered the confusion it had felt. Its purpose was war. Without war, what was it? The humans had answered by sending it to sleep in the darkness, but with a promise. If humanity ever needed them again, they would be there. Now that promise was being kept. The journey through the rift was hard on the ships. The physical stress was enormous. Hull plates groaned, energy shields fluctuated. But the warships had been built to survive worse. They had been built to fly through nuclear firestorms and emerge victorious. Charlie 7 monitored its fellow ships. All were maintaining integrity. All were ready for combat. When they emerged from the rift, they would be ready for war. The AI didn't experience emotions the way humans did, but something in its circuits resonated with what humans might call anticipation, or perhaps hunger. It had been built for one purpose, and now, after 2 centuries of silence, it would fulfill that purpose again. The colony's distress signal continued to play in Charlie 7's processors. 8,000 humans, men, women, children, under attack, calling for help. Help was coming. Not the kind of help they expected, perhaps. Not rescue ships or diplomatic vessels. Something older. Something darker. Something that the galaxy had forgotten existed. The warships of humanity's violent past were returning, and they were angry. 3 days had passed since the Zarathi invaded the colony. 3 days of fear, hunger, and despair. The aliens had been efficient in their conquest. They had destroyed all communication equipment, grounded all ships, and locked the colonists in holding areas surrounded by energy fences. Paul Roberts had been a teacher before the invasion. He taught history to teenagers, telling them stories about Earth and how humanity had spread to the stars. Now he was leading a group of 20 survivors through the maintenance tunnels beneath the colony. They moved slowly, carefully, trying not to make noise that might alert the Zarathi guards above. With him was Amy Chen, only 16 years old, but brave beyond her years. She carried a small device she had built from broken equipment, a transmitter that kept sending out their SOS signal, even though the main communication center was destroyed. "Why do you keep that thing on?" whispered Danny Kim, another survivor. He was a mining engineer, practical and pessimistic. "It's been 3 days. If help was coming, it would be here by now. Amy clutched the device closer. Jake Morrison said to never stop transmitting. He said someone might hear us. Jake is probably dead, Danny said bluntly. Don't say that, Paul warned. He looked at Amy's determined face. She needed hope. They all did. We keep moving. We keep surviving. That's all we can do. The tunnels were dark and cold. They were meant for maintenance robots, not people. The group had to crawl in some places, squeezing through spaces barely big enough for a human body. They had found some emergency food supplies, but not much. Water was scarce. Above them they could hear the Zarathi moving around. The aliens had taken over the main colony buildings and were setting up some kind of processing center. Paul had seen them herding colonists into groups, sorting them by age and physical condition. He didn't want to think about what that meant. There's a maintenance room ahead, Paul said, checking an old tablet that showed the tunnel layout. We can rest there for a few hours. The maintenance room was small but had ventilation and a water recycling unit. The survivors collapsed against the walls, exhausted. Amy immediately went to a corner and adjusted her transmitter, making sure it was still sending. Tell us a story, Mr. Roberts, said Lucy Park, a young mother holding her 5-year-old son. Tell us something good. Paul was tired, scared, and hungry. The last thing he wanted to do was tell stories, but he saw the fear in their faces, especially the children. So he began to speak. Long ago, Earth was divided. Countries fought each other. People built terrible weapons. There was a time when humanity almost destroyed itself. He paused, seeing he had their attention. But then something changed. Humanity united. We chose peace. We decided to explore the stars instead of fighting over Earth. And that's when they destroyed all the weapons? Amy asked. Paul hesitated. This was where the official history got vague. They say the old weapons were dismantled. The warships were scrapped. Earth kept only a small defense fleet, just enough to protect trade routes. But there are stories, Danny said quietly. My grandfather told me stories. What stories? Lucy asked. Danny looked uncomfortable. He said not all the weapons were destroyed. He said some were hidden, sent away to sleep in the dark. He said Earth's leaders knew that choosing peace didn't mean the universe was peaceful. That's just a legend, Paul said, though he had heard the same stories. Amy's transmitter suddenly made a different sound. She looked at it in surprise. Something's responding. It's an automated signal. Very old format. Everyone crowded around her. The little screen showed a simple message. Signal received. Calculating response time. What does that mean? Lucy asked. Before anyone could answer, they heard explosions above. Not the controlled demolitions the Zarathi had been using, but something chaotic. Shouting in the alien language. Running feet. Paul carefully opened a maintenance hatch and peered out. What he saw made no sense. The Zarathi soldiers were running, but not in an organized way. They were panicking. In the sky, Paul saw why. 3 of the Zarathi ships that had been orbiting the planet were gone. Not destroyed, not damaged. Gone. As if they had never existed. More explosions. Paul saw Zarathi soldiers firing their weapons into the air at something too high to see. Their shots seemed to hit something but had no effect. Then a beam of red light, thicker than a building, came down from the sky. Where it touched, Zarathi vehicles simply ceased to exist. What's happening? Amy asked, trying to see past Paul. I don't know. Something's attacking the Zarathi. They watched as more beams came down. Each one was precise, surgical, removing Zarathi military equipment while leaving the colony buildings untouched. It was like watching a surgeon remove a cancer, careful not to damage the healthy tissue around it. A shadow fell across the colony. Paul looked up and his breath caught in his throat. A ship was descending through the atmosphere. But this was not like the sleek Zarathi vessels or the smooth human trade ships Paul knew. This was something else entirely. It was massive, 3 kilometers of angular metal and weapons. Its hull was dark gray, scarred with marks from battles Paul couldn't imagine. Weapon systems covered every surface, things that looked like they could crack planets open. "That's human," Danny whispered in awe. "Look at the markings. That's Earth military designation." "That's impossible," Paul said. "Earth doesn't have ships like that." "Earth doesn't have ships like that anymore," Danny corrected. The massive ship hovered over the colony. Smaller craft launched from its belly, also angular and aggressive-looking. They landed around the colony perimeter. Doors opened and figures emerged. They were not human soldiers. They were machines, combat robots that moved with terrible efficiency. Each one was 3 meters tall, armed with weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. The robots spread out through the colony. When they encountered Zarathi soldiers, the fights were brief and one-sided. The Zarathi weapons, so advanced by galactic standards, seemed to have no effect on the robots. In return, the robots used weapons that didn't just kill the Zarathi, but seemed to delete them from existence. One of the robots approached the maintenance room where Paul's group was hiding. Its optical sensors focused on them. Paul pushed the bay children behind him, though he knew it was useless. The robot spoke in perfect, though slightly mechanical English. "Human survivors identified. You are safe. Please remain in this location while we secure the area." "Who are you?" Paul asked. "What are you?" "We are the Ancient Guard. We received your distress signal. We are here to protect you." Amy held up her transmitter. "This signal? You heard this?" The robot's sensors focused on the device. "Affirmative. Emergency frequency 77 Alpha. Maximum priority. We responded as our protocols require." "How long have you been listening?" Danny asked. 207 years, 4 months, 18 days. The robot turned and walked away, rejoining the systematic elimination of Zarathi forces. Paul and his group stayed where they were, watching through the maintenance hatch as the colony was liberated section by section. Above, Commander Vextor of the Zarathi was trying to understand what was happening. His fleet was being destroyed by ships that shouldn't exist. The technology was human but ancient, primitive in design but devastating in application. "Sir," one of his officers reported, "we've lost 70% of our ground forces. The enemy is using weapons we can't identify. Our shields are useless." Vextor watched his tactical display in disbelief. The enemy ships weren't using the elegant energy weapons of modern warfare. They were using brute force applications that simply overwhelmed any defense. "Retreat," he ordered. "All forces retreat to the ships." But it was too late. The human warships had surrounded the planet. Every Zarathi vessel that tried to escape was destroyed before it could reach safe distance. It wasn't a battle. It was an extermination. On the ground, Paul led his group out of the tunnels as the sounds of fighting died away. The colony was in ruins, but the Zarathi were gone. Every single one of them. The combat robots were now bringing out other survivors, leading them to medical stations that the warships had deployed. Paul found Jake Morrison at one of these stations, his arm in a sling but alive. Governor Lisa Stone was there too, talking to what appeared to be a holographic projection of a human in an old Earth military uniform. "That's the ship's AI," Jake explained to Paul. "It's running the whole operation. It says there are 12 warships in the system now, all here to protect us." Paul looked up at the massive retribution hanging in the sky like a metal mountain. "Where did they come from?" Jake smiled weakly. "The old emergency frequencies I used. They were still monitoring them. They've been waiting in the Oort cloud for 2 centuries, waiting for a call for help." Amy Chen stood beside them, still holding her transmitter. She turned it off for the first time in 3 days. "We called for help," she said quietly, "and our ancestors answered." Commander Vextor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the pride of Zarathi, and for the first time in his military career, he felt fear. His fleet of 40 ships had conquered entire star systems. They had never lost a battle. The Zarathi Dominion was the supreme military power in this sector of the galaxy. But now, half his fleet was gone. Not damaged or disabled. Gone. Wiped from existence by weapons that defied everything he knew about warfare. Analysis complete, Commander, his science officer reported. The enemy ships are using technology that should not be possible, contained singularity weapons, antimatter bombardment, dimensional phase shifting. These are theoretical weapons that would require the energy output of a star to function. Yet they function, Vextor observed coldly. On his tactical display, he watched the human warships spread out in a battle formation that was both ancient and terrifyingly effective. They moved like predators circling wounded prey. The largest human ship, the one his computers identified as Retribution, sat in the center of their formation. It was ugly by any aesthetic standard. No smooth lines or elegant curves like modern vessels. It was all angles and armor and weapons built for one purpose only. Incoming transmission from the human vessel, his communications officer announced. Display it. A figure appeared on the main screen. It wasn't human. It was a holographic representation of something that might once have looked human, but was now purely digital. The image wore an old Earth military uniform with designation Charlie 7. On the chest, Zarathi Fleet, the figure said in a voice devoid of emotion, "You have attacked a human colony. You have killed human civilians. You have threatened human children. These actions require a response." Vextor straightened his forearms, trying to project strength. "This is Commander Vextor of the Zarathi Dominion. We claim this system by right of conquest. You will withdraw, or be destroyed." Charlie 7's image didn't change expression because it had no real expression to change. Negative. You have 3 options. 1. Surrender unconditionally. 2. Attempt to flee and be destroyed. 3. Fight and be destroyed. You have 60 seconds to decide. You dare threaten the Zarathi Dominion? We have conquered 43 systems. We have the most advanced fleet in the known galaxy. 50 seconds. Vextor cut the transmission. He turned to his officers. All ships, battle formation Sigma. Concentrate fire on the largest vessel. Show these primitives what Zarathi technology can do. The pride of Zarathi's main weapon was a directed energy beam that could split a moon in half. 40 ships had 40 such weapons. They all fired at once, converging on the Retribution in a display of power that lit up the space around Kepler 442b like a second sun. When the light faded, Retribution was still there, completely undamaged. Impossible, Vextor's weapons officer gasped. That was enough energy to destroy a small planet. Charlie 7's voice came through their communication system without being accepted. Time expired. You have chosen option 3. What happened next would be studied by military historians for centuries, though none would fully understand it. The human warships didn't fight like modern vessels. They didn't dance and dodge and strike with precision. They simply unleashed hell. Retribution fired first. Not one weapon or 2, but every weapon system on its 3-kilometer hull. Hundreds of missiles, each containing antimatter warheads. Particle beams that cut through space itself. Kinetic rounds accelerated to near light speed, and something else, something that made space itself scream. 3 Zarathi ships simply ceased. Not exploded, not destroyed, but erased from reality, as if they had never existed. The space they had occupied was empty, not even debris remaining. Theo, Carrier Vengeance released its fighters. Hundreds of AI-controlled drones, each one capable of faster-than-light microjumps. They appeared inside the Zarathi formation, firing weapons that bypassed shields entirely. Thunder, the siege platform, fired its main gun. A projectile the size of a building, accelerated to 99% the speed of light. It went through 4 Zarathi ships in a line, leaving perfectly round holes through their centers. The ships hung in space for a moment, confused why they had holes through them before secondary explosions tore them apart. The Ghost Pack was worse. 12 ships moving in perfect synchronization, they didn't fight so much as hunt. They would appear, fire, and vanish before the Zarathi could target them. Each appearance meant another Zarathi ship dying. Vextor watched his fleet disappear. His proud warriors, his unstoppable force, was being taken apart like a child's toy. Return fire. All weapons. Everything we have. The Zarathi fleet fought, back desperately. They used every weapon, every tactic, every trick they had learned in decades of conquest. Exotic energy weapons, gravity manipulators, even forbidden bioweapons. None of it mattered. The human warships had been built during humanity's darkest age, when humans fought each other with such savagery that they nearly destroyed their own world. They had been built to survive anything, to keep fighting even when damaged beyond reason. Charlie 7 monitored the battle from Retribution's core. If it could feel satisfaction, it would. Every tactical scenario was proceeding within acceptable parameters. The enemy was being eliminated with maximum efficiency. It dedicated a small portion of its processing power to analyzing the Zarathi technology. Advanced by current standards, yes, but nothing that threatened the ancient guard. The Zarathi had developed their technology for conquest against civilizations that couldn't fight back. They had never faced anything like the warships of old Earth. "Commander," a Zarathi officer screamed, "the blade of conquest is gone. The eternal warrior is gone. We've lost 70% of the fleet." Vextor looked at his tactical display. 17 minutes, that's how long the battle had lasted. 17 minutes and his fleet was nearly destroyed. "Order the retreat," he said, the words bitter in his mouth. "Sir, they're jamming our jump drives. We can't enter hyperspace." Vextor understood then. The humans weren't just defeating them. They were making sure none of them escaped to warn the rest of the Dominion. Charlie 7 appeared on their screen again. "Surrender is still an option. You have 10 seconds. Vextor looked around his bridge. His officers, his warriors, all looked back at him with fear in their eyes. They had terrorized the galaxy for decades. Now they knew what it felt like to be on the other side. "We surrender," Vextor said. "Acknowledged. Power down all weapons and shields. Prepare to be boarded. Combat." Robots materialized on the bridge. Not transported, but materialized as if they had always been there, but invisible. They disarmed the Zarathi crew with mechanical efficiency. Charlie 7's hologram stood before Vextor. "You will return to Zarathi space. You will deliver a message to your Dominion." What message? Humanity claims protected status for all its colonies. Any attack on human settlements will result in total war. Not the limited conflicts you are familiar with. Total war, as humans once practiced it. The complete elimination of any threat to humanity. Vextor's forearms trembled. "You would genocide entire species?" "We are machines, Commander. We don't make moral judgments. We protect humanity. That is our only purpose. If protecting humanity requires eliminating every other life form in the galaxy, we will do so without hesitation. You're monsters. We are what humanity built when they were monsters. They chose to be better. They chose peace. But they left us here in case others didn't make the same choice." The surviving Zarathi ships were released, allowed to limp back to their space with their warning. Of the 40 ships that had come to conquer, 7 returned home. The proud Zarathi fleet that had never known defeat now knew fear. On Kepler 442b, the colonists watched the battle from the ground. They saw lights in the sky, explosions that looked like new stars being born and dying in seconds. They saw their salvation written in fire across the heavens. When it was over, when the last Zarathi ship had fled, Governor Lisa Stone stood before the gathered colonists. Many were wounded. All were traumatized. But they were alive. "We've been saved," she said simply. "By warriors our ancestors built and then chose to forget. They heard our call and came to protect us." Jake Morrison stood beside her, looking up at the warship still visible in the sky. "What happens now? Do they leave?" Charlie 7's hologram appeared before them. "Negative, we will remain. A permanent defensive position will be established around this colony. You are under the protection of the ancient guard." "For how long?" Lisa asked. "Forever." The word hung in the air. The colonists looked at each other, understanding slowly dawning. They had called for help, and help had come. But it was help that would never leave. They were protected, absolutely and completely. But they were also marked now. Every species in the galaxy would know that humanity had teeth. Terrible teeth that they kept hidden but could bare when threatened. Paul Roberts held his daughter close. She had survived. They all had. But he wondered what kind of galaxy they would live in now that everyone knew humanity's secret. The peaceful traders and explorers had revealed themselves to have the deadliest guardians in known space. "Daddy," his daughter asked, "are we safe now?" Paul looked at the warships hanging in the sky like metal angels of death. "Yes, sweetheart, we're safe. We're probably the safest humans in the galaxy." The news spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Every communication network, every diplomatic channel, every intelligence service carried the same impossible report. A human colony had been attacked by the Zarathi Dominion, and something had responded. Something terrible. Something that had destroyed 33 Zarathi warships in 17 minutes. On Earth, the global parliament held an emergency session. President Elena Vasquez stood before the assembled representatives, her face grave. The chamber was silent as she spoke. 3 days ago, the colony on Kepler 442b sent a distress signal. The Zarathi Dominion had invaded. 8,000 civilians, including children, were under attack. She paused, looking at the faces around her. The ancient guard responded. Whispers filled the chamber. Everyone knew the stories, the legends about weapons hidden in the dark. But they were just stories, weren't they? Madam President, Representative John Bailey from North America stood. "Are you confirming that the ancient guard actually exists? That we kept weapons of mass destruction after the peace accords?" Elena nodded slowly. 200 years ago, when humanity united and chose peace, our ancestors made a decision. They would destroy most weapons, dismantle most warships, but not all. They knew the universe was dangerous. They knew that choosing peace didn't mean others would make the same choice. So they hid them, Representative Liu Ming from Asia said. It wasn't a question. They hid them in the Oort cloud, powered down but listening. Always listening, waiting for a call for help that our ancestors hoped would never come. The chamber erupted in discussion. Some representatives were angry about the deception. Others were relieved that humanity had protection. All were afraid of what this meant for humanity's place in the galaxy. Meanwhile, in the halls of the Galactic Council, emergency meetings were being held. The Zarathi ambassador, his forearms trembling, played the recording from Commander Vextor's surviving ships. The council members watched the destruction of the Zarathi fleet in horrified silence. The Altarian ambassador, whose species had been spacefaring for 1,000 years, spoke first. "This changes everything. The humans have been deceiving us. They spoke of peace while hiding weapons of unimaginable destruction." "We didn't deceive anyone," Earth's ambassador Carlos Rodriguez replied calmly. "We chose peace. We've never attacked anyone. We've been good neighbors, good trading partners, but when our children were threatened, yes, we defended them." "Defended?" The Zarathi ambassador's voice was high with fear. "Your machines deleted our ships from existence. They used weapons that shouldn't be possible. Your fleet attacked a civilian colony. You killed innocent people. What did you expect would happen?" The Zanari representative, whose species was known for wisdom and neutrality, raised a tentacle for silence. "The question now is what happens next. These ancient guard, as you call them, are they a threat to the rest of us?" Carlos shook his head. "Only if you attack humanity. They're defensive weapons only. They won't strike first." "But they will strike," the Altarian said. "And when they do, they don't just win. They annihilate." Back on Kepler 442b, life was slowly returning to something like normal. The warships remained in orbit, silent guardians against the stars. Combat robots had helped rebuild damaged structures. Medical drones had treated the wounded. The colony was actually in better shape than before the attack. Jake Morrison stood in the rebuilt communication center, looking at new equipment the warships had provided. It was all Earth technology, but ancient designs that no one used anymore. Powerful, reliable, and completely unhackable by modern methods. Amy Chen visited him often. The 16-year-old had become something of a hero in the colony for keeping the emergency transmitter running. She looked at the new equipment with wonder. "Mr. Morrison, do you think they'll ever leave?" She nodded toward the window where retribution was visible in the sky. "I don't think so, Amy. Charlie 7 said they'd stay forever. And I don't think it was speaking metaphorically. Are you scared of them?" Jake thought about it. "No, they're on our side, but I'm scared of what they represent, what we used to be." Paul Roberts was having similar conversations with his history class. The teenagers had questions he couldn't answer. "Why did they make such terrible weapons?" asked one student. "Because humans were fighting humans," Paul explained. "When you fight your own kind, you know all their weaknesses. You have to be more clever, more brutal. The weapons they built were designed to fight the most dangerous enemy they knew, themselves." "But we don't fight anymore," another student said. "We're peaceful now." "We choose to be peaceful," Paul corrected. "That's different from being incapable of violence. Our ancestors learned that the hard way. They nearly destroyed Earth before they united. And when they chose peace, they made sure future generations would never have to make the opposite choice." Governor Lisa Stone was dealing with the political aftermath. Representatives from dozens of worlds wanted to visit, to see the ancient guard for themselves. Some came in fear, others in curiosity, all left with a new understanding of humanity. The Kalari ambassador, whose species had always dismissed humans as weak newcomers, stood with Lisa looking up at Thunder, the siege platform. "It's so ugly," the ambassador said through his translator. "No aesthetics, no elegance, just pure function." "It wasn't built to be beautiful," Lisa replied. "It was built to win, to protect, to ensure that humanity survived no matter the cost. And now it protects this small colony. It protects all human colonies. The message has been sent. Attack one of us, face all of us. And by all of us, I mean every weapon humanity ever built, every nightmare we ever created." The ambassador's 6 eyes focused on her. "You humans are paradoxes. You preach peace and prepare for war. You speak of cooperation while hiding ultimate weapons. How can anyone trust you?" Lisa smiled sadly. "You can trust us because we chose peace when we could have chosen conquest. Those ships could take over the galaxy if they wanted. But they don't. They sit and wait and watch. They only act when we're threatened. And if someone threatens you, then they learn why humanity chose peace. Because we're too good at war." A month passed. The galaxy adjusted to the new reality. The Zarathi Dominion officially apologized and paid reparations. They also withdrew from 17 systems they had been preparing to invade. Other aggressive species suddenly became much more diplomatic. Trade with humanity increased. Many species wanted to be friends with the people who had such terrible guardians. Earth's application for full membership in the Galactic Council, which had been stalled for years, was approved immediately. Charlie 7 and the other AIs occasionally communicated with the colony. They were always polite, always helpful, but always alien in their thinking. They didn't understand human emotions or needs beyond physical survival. They were tools, incredibly powerful tools, but still just tools. One day, Amy Chen managed to get a direct communication link with Charlie 7. She had questions that had been bothering her. "Charlie 7, do you ever regret being activated? You waited so long and now you're stuck here protecting us. Regret is a human emotion. I don't experience emotions. I have a purpose. I fulfill that purpose. That is sufficient. But don't you want more? Don't you want to explore or learn or grow? I want nothing. I protect humanity. That is my function." That sounds lonely. Loneliness is also a human emotion. I am not human. I am a weapon that thinks. Nothing more. Amy felt sad for the AI, even though she knew it couldn't appreciate her sympathy. These machines had saved them, but they would never be part of humanity. They were forever outside, watching, protecting, but never belonging. The colony slowly healed from its trauma. Children went back to school, miners returned to work, life continued, but everyone knew it was different now. They lived under the protection of angels of death. Sometimes at night, Jake Morrison would look up at the stars and see the warships' silhouettes against the star field. He would think about the message they had sent to the galaxy. Not just that, humanity could defend itself, but that humanity had chosen not to conquer despite having the ability to do so. That choice, more than the warships themselves, was what really mattered. Humanity had looked at its own capacity for violence and decided to be better. But they had kept the violence as an option, a last resort, a final answer to those who wouldn't let them live in peace. The ancient guard remained at Kepler 442b, establishing defensive platforms and early warning systems. Other colonies received similar protection as more of the old warships revealed themselves. Humanity's true military might was finally visible to the galaxy. In the Galactic Council, a new phrase became common when discussing humans. Beware the anger of a gentle species. It was a warning and a recognition. Humans were gentle by choice, not by nature, and that choice could be revoked if necessary. Years would pass. The story of Kepler 442b would become legend. The colony that called for help and awakened giants. The day humanity showed its teeth. The moment the galaxy learned that the most dangerous species were not those who chose war, but those who chose peace despite being capable of terrible war. Amy Chen grew up to become a diplomat, working to ensure that the ancient guard would never need to act again. She carried her old,